Hello, and welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 52. We're going to talk about Children of the Full Moon from 1980. I watched this on Tubi. I had not seen this before. Let's begin with the prominent crew and cast. This film was directed by Tom Clegg, written by Murray Smith, with effects makeup by Eddie Knight. The cast includes Christopher Cazenove as Tom, Celia Gregory as Sarah, Diana Dors as Mrs. Ardoy, Robert Urquhart as Harry, Jacob Witkin as the woodcutter, aka Mr. Ardoy. Christopher Cazenove is probably best known to American audiences from his role in the 80s primetime soap opera Dynasty. I was delighted to learn about Diana Dors. She was born Diana Fluck and took a stage name for what I feel are fairly obvious reasons. She died far too young at the age of 52 from cancer. Despite that shorter than typical lifespan, she has more than 100 credits at IMDb, on top of numerous music albums and the cabaret tours. She lied about her age to become a pinup girl at the age of 13. She claimed to be 17. She's been called the English Marilyn Monroe, a sexy blonde bombshell. I'll link to her autobiography in the show notes, but there are several other biographies about her life as well. Robert Urquhart was a solid working actor, racking up over 120 credits over 4 decades. I'll talk more about this later, but I recommend the whole series that this episode comes from. Like any anthology show, some episodes are better than others, but as a general rule, Hammer's House of Horror is good. This is also a good werewolf episode I can recommend to anyone. It's more atmospheric and creepy than scary or gory, but it's still enjoyable. An interesting tidbit, large areas in the UK missed the last few minutes of this episode when it first aired due to an electrical blackout. Public outcry was so high that the conclusion was printed in national newspapers. Many people, however, felt like that wasn't sufficient, and the broadcaster received enough complaints to prompt them to replay the episode the following week. Let's go over the synopsis. A little girl in a pretty white dress eats fresh kill with a pack of wolves. Credits. A posh British couple, Tom and Sarah Martin, head into the country for a vacation when their vehicle breaks down near Somerset Woods. Since cell phones won't be invented for a few decades, they hike for help. They find a large country manor. Mrs. Ardoy welcomes them and lets them use the telephone. She also offers to shelter them for the night. Mrs. Ardoy has a lot of children running around. Some are stepchildren and some are fostered. She frequently speaks about her husband, but he's never seen. She has trouble remembering how many kids actually live there. She says 8, but I counted more than 8. The kids are strange. They sleep at odd times, fear fire, roam the woods at night, and get clumsy as darkness approaches. They dress very old-fashioned. You can always hear giggling just out of sight. One boy plays the flute beautifully. Tom heads back to the car to collect their bags. He runs back after a half-human creature covered in gray fur with yellow eyes attacks him. Mrs. Ardoy brushes the description off. The children identify various women in pictures as their mothers. Later, Tom and Sarah hear howling from the woods. Somehow, Mrs. Ardoy got the Martins' luggage for them. She also warns them the family will be celebrating a Hungarian festival. That night, in their room, Sarah is horrified to see the face of a werewolf at the window. Finding the bedroom door locked, Tom climbs down a drain pipe. Meanwhile, the werewolf enters the room through the house and attacks Sarah as Mrs. Ardoy and the children watch in delight. Tom tries to climb back up but falls, knocking himself out. The following day, Tom awakens in a hospital. Sarah tells him they were in a car crash on their way to the cottage. He asks her about the family of werewolves that they encountered. She laughs and tells him that he must have been dreaming. Tom thinks it was too real to have been a dream. She suggests that maybe he was concussed or maybe the pain medication is causing him faulty memory. Back home, Tom confides to his colleague Harry that Sarah is different. She has a voracious appetite for sex. Harry agrees with him that it is unlikely to all be just a dream. Tom has to leave on a business trip. Weeks later, Sarah reveals that she is 8 weeks pregnant. She eats raw steak. The baby grows unnaturally quickly. One day, Sarah disappears from their flat. Tom somehow suspects that she's heading back to the house in the Somerset Woods. Mrs. Ardoy and her children have prepared for Sarah's arrival. Her portrait is already framed in the house, although I have no idea when they took her picture. The children camouflage the gate to the manor. Tom has to search for the house. He runs across a woodcutter who denies that there is any house. Tom asks the man about werewolves. The man says werewolves are just myths. The man lets slip that he is also from Hungary. The man hints a werewolf might need many mates. Tom uncovers that the woodcutter is Mr. Ardoy as the moon rises. Mr. Ardoy begins to change into a werewolf and kills Tom with his axe. Mrs. Ardoy and the other children welcome their new baby brother into their pack. However, Sarah died during childbirth. There isn't much of a transformation. Shoot, we only meet the werewolf at the very end of the show, and he only partially transforms before killing Tom with the axe. The makeup job is passable, but not amazing. What transformation we do get is under cover of darkness, which I actually prefer to static dissolves at this point. This is an interesting new addition to werewolf lore. It's not brand new, of course, but it's clear here. The rats are coming, the werewolves are already here, already hinted at weird lycanthropic breeding practices. But Children of the Moon is all about that, a werewolf breeding a new pack. The only indication that these werewolves have any connection to the moon is the title. There's no mention of the moon phase at any point in the show. The show hints that they change into werewolves every night. There's no mention of silver or any weakness. I did wonder at the end if Mrs. Ardoy is also a werewolf or just knows what her husband is. We never really find that out. So let's talk about Hammer House of Horror. Hammer House of Horror was a British horror anthology television series that aired in 1980. It was created by Hammer Films, which we've already talked about before when we discussed The Curse of the Werewolf. The series only ran for 13 episodes, each featuring a different kind of horror. Episodes were an hour long and covered a range of subgenres, including supernatural themes like witches, werewolves, and ghosts, as well as non-supernatural themes like cannibalism and serial killers. The show was a hit and initially was renewed for a second season, but poor business decisions at ITC TV led to a management shakeup that sank the show. I thought this was the second of 4 television series Hammer did, but I'm only finding info on 3. My memory could be failing me here, but if any of my wolf pack have any recollections, I would love to see them in the comments below. Hammer House of Horror was known for its talented cast and captivating stories. Each episode provided a unique tale of terror and suspense, with good direction and fast-paced storytelling. The series was praised for its quality content, often compared to the original Twilight Zone. It offered a variety of horror experiences from werewolves and demons to voodoo dolls and demented Nazis. The complete series of Hammer House of Horror is available for purchase as a DVD box set, or you can stream the whole thing on several streaming services. So, if you're in the mood for spine-chilling tales and unforgettable scares, Hammer House of Horror is worth checking out. So let's move on to the metaphor of the film. It's pretty easy to understand the metaphor this episode is playing toward. The Ardoys are immigrants, Hungarian specifically, but I don't think that that's critical. The important thing is that these immigrants are out reproducing our fine, upstanding English couple. They have their strange customs and holidays, their unorthodox and immoral ways. Of course, the show never comes out and says this. It's a classic example of what academic art critics call subtext. Subtext is the lines between the lines. It's unspoken, like a secret code the audience has to decipher by reading between the lines and inferring the hidden message. Sometimes subtext is used to imply controversial subjects without drawing attention from censors. It can also be used to deliver social critiques more safely, especially in science fiction or in stories set in different periods. Often horror films use subtext to bypass the critical conscious parts of our brains and tap into our deeper subconscious spheres, which is what I think is going on in this show. I want to finish up by talking about Sarah's weird behavior in the second half of the movie. The only oddity in her behavior early in the show is that she made an offhand comment about somehow knowing she and Tom would end up stranded on this specific road, which hints that the Ardoys were using some kind of occult power to draw her in. But other than that, she behaves like I would expect a woman to act in this situation. Then comes the assault. We don't see it. We're given no clue. It's not a typical werewolf attack. This is why the jump cut to Tom waking up from unconsciousness in the hospital is such a shock. But Sarah was sexually assaulted by the werewolf and impregnated by the creature, seeking to expand its family. From this point on, Sarah seems to be in league with the Ardoys, or maybe her memory of the attack was blocked out somehow. She gaslights Tom about the Ardoy manor. She does not tell him what happened. She leads him on that he is the father of her baby, or maybe she believes he is. She doesn't tell the authorities what happened. Her eating habits have changed, but that could just be the consequences of the pregnancy. The explanation for all that makes the most sense to me is that her mind has been clouded. But then Sarah knows when it's time to head to the Ardway Manor. She helps hide her car so Tom cannot follow or find her. Mrs. Ardway does not have to use any force or coercion to get Sarah ready for the delivery of the baby. That seems to imply that she's aware of what's going on and is cooperating. So how did the Ardways obtain her cooperation? I don't know. I'd like to, but not knowing doesn't destroy the show for me. The ambiguity opens space for fans like us to speculate and discuss the options. So, speculate and discuss the options. If you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts on this and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing the Panther Women from 1967. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back here next episode.